morning, I'm Rahaf. I'm the black-haired one, don't forget.
Hello everyone, good morning. I am Ghada Abdurrahman and this is our presentation for today.
Matthew Arnold was an English poet and cultural critic who was born in December in 2020 in England. He started his literary career as a poet, but was mostly known for his critical essays. He was the oldest son of Thomas Arnold, the headmaster of Rugby School, which Matthew used to attend as a student and teach at after his father's death. Arnold used to win a lot of prizes in his school years and won an open scholarship for Oxford in 1881 at the age of 18. Although Arnold is considered one of the major poets now, unfortunately he was not recognized in his own time.
He got his early education at Rugby, then he went to college, Balliol College in Oxford, England. Here his poetic talent came to light when he secured the New Day Prize for his poem, Cromwell. After completing his graduation, he returned to Rugby and worked as a teacher of classics. In 1847, he was appointed as a private secretary to Lord Lansdowne. In 1851, he was appointed as an inspector of schools. He made a great contribution to higher education throughout his life. Then he was appointed as a professor of poetry at Oxford and served position for 2 consecutive terms of 5 years. And he was the first professor to deliver a lecture in English. Matthew died on 15 April 1888, Liverpool, England. Culture and Anarchy, his major work of criticism. It was published in 1869. Essays and Criticism. It was published in 1865. And Matthew here tells us the meaning of culture is to know the best that has been thought and said in the world. Dover Beach is a lyric poem and it's one of his famous work. It was published in 1867 in the collection New Poems. Matthew had a significant contribution to literary criticism by providing a method to criticize the poetry, which is touchstone. Actually, it's a comparative method. But firstly, let's define this term. Touchstone means a standard or criterion by which something is judged or recognized. Matthew introduced this concept in his essay, Study of Poetry. And the aim of this method is to judge and criticize the poet's works by comparing it to works taken from works of the great masters of poetry. But what is the real idea for this method? Matthew said real classic is a work which belongs to the class of very best. It can be recognized by placing it beside the noun classics of the world. And those noun classics that he mentioned can serve as the touchstone for the works. So it was a comparative system for criticism. And how is this process done? Matthew took selected passages from the modern authors and compared them with selected passages from the ancient authors like Shakespeare, Spenser, Milton, and thus decide their merits. The method of comparing passages with a passage is not sufficient test for determining the value of a work as a whole. Matthew himself insisted that we must judge a poem by the total impression and not by its fragment. Now let's know what the other critics said about Matthew's method. Well, I think that's obvious. His method wasn't liked by others. They said about him that Arnold is too austere and too exacting, comparing a simple modern poet with the ancient master poet, which I completely agree with them. I see this way to judging a work unfair, because poets like Shakespeare and Milton, they are not normal people. They're like the goddess of literature. No one can write as good as they wrote. Yes, we have great poets, but not like them. But Matthew pursued the perfection. He wanted all the works to be great and perfect. But he was wrong in his idea. Every poet has his way to express his thoughts, so it's wrong to compare it with others.
To Arnold, culture is the complete perfection. It is to collect and teach the best that has been said and known in the world. Arnold believed that the purpose of poetry should be greater than only serving pleasure and appreciating beauty. It should contribute to the society, interpret life, console people, and sustain them. Arnold believed that a good poet is someone with vast experience. Their intelligence have to be obtained by immense reading and learning. Arnold said that the greatness of poetry relies on the powerfulness of the application of ideas. I think Arnold had a very unstable relationship with religion due to being raised in a very liberal household. He was later influenced by a churchman and practiced Christianity for a while, and although the topic was a great cause of concern to him, he worked really hard to find the real essence of Christianity, and he later in his life abandoned it and became agnostic, which is someone who does not deny the existence of God but does not believe in it either. They think it is something beyond humans' knowledge. And either we approve or disapprove his beliefs, I admire the fact that he did not blindly follow what his family believed in, but rather found or tried to find the truth himself, and went through a few stages of confusion in his life in order to reach what he eventually felt is right for him. And it does not necessarily need to be religion related, but I think it also applies to many other things in life, that we should look for what suits us the best instead of being indoctrinated in order to live a life that is convincing for us and a life that is doubt-free.
Is a dramatic monologue. It was written at a time when England had seen the Industrial Revolution and it was moving towards modernity, it lamenting the loss of a true faith in England. Modernity associated with loss of faith in religion and nature, and Matthew was a traditional and religious man. So he was sad about overtaking the religion and upset about the technology and Industrial Revolution. At that time, people start forgetting their roots and their faith in religion, which make him sad. So in his poem, he talked about sadness in the human life. He says, this modern life is devoid of religion and faith, and we cannot see the beauty of nature. The poem was about the sadness in the human life and the loss of faith. The verb each poem has 4 stanzas, and there is no rhyme scheme. Matthew starts his poem by describing the sound of the waves when it's rubbing against the pebbles on the shore. The movement of the sea when it recedes and returns, it seems sad to Matthew, as if the returning sea is bringing with it the internal note of sadness in. He also described the reflection of the moonlight on the sea while he's standing on the Dover coast. That time, everything was gloomy for Matthew. And the second stanza, which was shorter than the first, Matthew states that long ago, Sophocles has also heard the sound of the sea. It too brought to his mind the feelings of a human misery. Sophocles is one of the best known dramatic writers of ancient Greece. In the third stanza, the poem became clear for us that Arnold talked about the diminishing faith of his country. Arnold sees it spread apart by new sciences and conflicting opinions. In the last stanza, Matthew with his wife, they made promises to be true to each other. He points out clearly this new modern world is deprived of the beautiful human sentiments of joy, love, and correct knowledge. Here I have a video of the last part of the poem that I would like you to see it.
In the last stanza, the poet, along with his beloved, made a promise to each other that they would be true to one another through thick and thin. The seemingly beautiful world has neither joy nor love, nor any certainty about anything. It is shorn of peace and remedy for pain.
For me, I don't read many poetry, and as I said before on one of the lectures, I see this language in bitty language. I cannot feel the writer's feelings in his work, but this one is so special, and I didn't say this because it's our poet, no. But when I read it, I feel peace, and I like the idea that it gives you when you're reading it for the first time. You would think it's a bright and happy poem, but internally you will feel the sadness. And the part of the promises between him and his wife was so emotional. And you know the feeling when you live in a faithless world, but you still have that person that you could trust and faith on it. It's everything. And I felt in this part he is trying to make us believe there's something still true in our life. So this poem, I really like it.
Now I'm going to talk about one of his greatest works, Culture and Anarchy. This work started in 1867 as a series of essays under the title Culture and Enemies. And in 1869, the total of 6 essays were eventually collected as a whole book, which was named Culture and Anarchy. The book has, as I said, 6 essays or chapters. Each talks about a different topic. The first is Sweetness and Light. The second is Doing as One Likes. The third is Barbarians, Philistines, Populace. The fourth is Hebrewism and Hellenism. The fifth is Bouronimus Nestorium. The sixth is Our Liberal Practitioners. Now let's discuss the first chapter, Sweetness and Light. Sweetness and light is an English idiom, means to be all lovely, peaceful, and friendly. By literary and cultural criticism, it stands for pleasing and instructive, which means to combine the beauty with intelligence, and it's the main purpose of poetry. The phrase got widely spread in the Victorian era after Arnold used it as the title of the first chapter in his book. On its name, this chapter talks about the cultural passion towards sweetness and light, and that culture's aim is for us to achieve perfection within ourselves. He believed that culture has to be only real sweetness and real light, and you might be wondering now what he exactly meant by that. Well, Arnold strongly held that, unlike what many people would try to do to the audience, by trying to intellectually feed and brainwash them to think in the same way they decided is appropriate for them, culture must follow a whole different path. Culture should not be all about indoctrinating the audience an already prepared set of ideas, but about teaching them the best that has been known and taught in the world, and guide them into choosing their own ideas and using them freely, and for them to live in an atmosphere of sweetness and light. Moving on to the next chapter, Doing as One Likes. This chapter was written during the Second Great Reform in England in 1867, which was basically a riot where working class males demanded an expansion of the number of men who can vote in elections, since they were prevented from giving votes. In this chapter, he contrasts culture, which he considered the absolute perfection, with the anarchy that was caused by the movement. Venting his anger, fear, and frustration towards society through a clear, flexible, and convincing style, this work was a masterpiece of polished prose. By this work, he sought an objective center of authority that anyone, despite religious and social bias, could follow. And in his criticism, he mainly targeted the liberal reform movement for the riot and the church and the government for not being able to handle it. Doing as One Like referred to the protesters caring about the ongoing events and not paying enough attention to the consequences. He urged people to think thoroughly of the outcomes of their actions and to not misuse the freedom they have to do whatever they want carelessly, and to be aware of the responsibilities that come with being free.